Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel, where I'm going to be talking about eclipses, more specifically the eclipses that are just ahead of us, and also the change really of the axis upon which eclipses occur. They've been on the Cancer Capricorn axis for about 18 months, and this is now changing. It's moving to Gemini and Sagittarius because the North Node is moving, or has actually moved in the earlier part of May, into the sign of Gemini. Now, I want to explain a little bit more about what eclipses are from an astronomical perspective. They have to do with the nodes of the moon, the point at which the moon's nodes connect with the ecliptic. And that's the apparent path of the sun. Now, of course, the sun doesn't move at all. We know that. We all move around the sun, so do all the planets. But it's how we perceive it. And of course, we perceive the sun rising and setting every day. And if we could see the sun moving through the whole of the zodiac, against the background of the constellations, it would look like that to us, even though, of course, it's from our perception. So every time the sun connects with the moon's nodes, then this is how eclipses occur. And we refer to a season of eclipses. I mean, I tend to use that in a little bit of a broader sense. You've heard me talking before about, we're in a season of eclipses because 2 or 3 of them are happening at the same time. But technically, a season of eclipses really is a little window of about 36 days when the sun gets in range, if you like, crosses the moon's nodes, and eclipses occur in that space. So we're just on the threshold of that now. And in fact, on June the 5th, we will have the first eclipse on the Gemini-Sagittarius axis. Then there'll be another one a little bit later in the month. On the 21st of June, we'll have a solar eclipse in the sign of Cancer. We haven't fully left it behind because of that 36-day window, that variation. And then on the 5th of July, we'll have another lunar eclipse on the Cancer Capricorn axis. The moon will be in Capricorn. Now, it takes about 19 years for the nodes to do a complete revolution of the zodiac. So about 18 months, the North Node will spend in a certain sign, the South Node in the opposite sign. So it's been about 19 years since we had the nodal axis occurring in the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. And that takes us back to about 2002. Now, there is also, it's especially important if you have the North Node in Gemini, if you were born with the North Node in Gemini, and you were born with that node in Gemini, if you were born in 1946, if you were born in 1965, if you were born in 1984, or you were born in 2002. Now, the opposite point is just as important. That's if you were born with the North Node in Sagittarius, and that means that you were born on that similar axis, as it says, the other way around, and these are the years that you have the North Node in Sagittarius. That's 1937, 1956, 1974, and 1993. So that's a special interest to you, and I'll explain why shortly. Now, one of the things that is very special about eclipses is immediately obvious. I mean, we see the moon, we see the sun. These are the 2 planetary, we call them planetary bodies, that we can see with our eyes. So you can imagine if we go back to ancient times when there was no television and nothing except really the constellations and the stars twinkling at night to entertain us. So the movement of the sun and the moon was all important. And you can imagine on any given day when the light of the sun itself was blacked out by the moon, became a very scary thing. And all sorts of doom-laden predictions were made about those kind of eclipses. Now, we owe a lot to the Babylonians. back in about the 8th century BC, who really made a huge study mathematically about eclipses when they occurred. And they did that by maths. They didn't have telescopes or any fancy computers to do that. They were incredibly accurate. And to the Babylonians, they noted that eclipses, it was the solar eclipse that really began a cycle of eclipses. So the solar eclipse assumed greater significance. And even today, I think modern astrologers, contemporary astrologers, still place a lot more emphasis on a solar eclipse. And even though certainly in the work that I do, I see them as equally important. And it has to be said that eclipses aren't really, the portents of great and good events. There's always some stress related to events that cluster around eclipses. Back in the day, back in ancient times, of course, eclipses were all about pestilences, wars, the births and deaths of kings, famine and drought. And I have to say, given that we had this lunar eclipse on the 10th of January this year, well, maybe we can learn a lot from the ancient. But let's get into another factor that I think is important. I look at history a lot to understand what eclipses may mean, what any particular planetary alignment may mean. And I just, for interest's sake, given that great events tend to cluster around the time of eclipses, when we go all the way back to 1981, July the 31st, 1981, Prince Charles and Diana were married on that eclipse, and it was a total solar eclipse. Now, whether that was by design or accident, we can debate that for years. But anyway, we see how important that was for the nation and the monarchy. If we come a little way forward to 1997, there was another solar eclipse on the 1st of September 1997, and that was within hours of the death of Diana. So we do see, significant world events that, make the headlines, if you like, and they cluster around eclipses. That's why they are important. But I want to stress here that, and this really comes in the way when we think about eclipses, are eclipsed new moons, they're eclipsed full moons, they come in cycles. And so they are absolutely connected with the idea of beginnings and endings. So that's the great cycle of life, isn't it? The opening of chapters, the closing of chapters, from desolation to constellation. And so we see this cycle really reflected always in our eclipse cycle. So what's very interesting also is that in 2001, we were heading into the North Node went into Gemini in the October of 2001. We then had this cycle of eclipses on the Gemini-Sagittarius axis throughout 2002 and a little bit into 2003. And of course, 2001 is significant because, of course, the 9/11 occurred a few weeks before that eclipse, and that changed absolutely everything. And as I'm going to be talking about in a minute, the idea of Gemini, Sagittarius, that axis, we're looking at travel, we're looking at flight in particular. And it was interesting how in 2001, in the wake of 9/11, it really affected flying. There was a huge drop in people actually taking planes, and of course borders, there was immigration. And it's interesting the echo that we find here 19 years later with yet another era where flight and travel is really affected, and so is immigration and moving through borders. We do really have quite an echo there. And in fact, there is a repeat of that, because in 2001, there was a solar eclipse on the 21st of June and another solar eclipse on the 14th of December. And we find that exactly repeated this year. So we have a solar eclipse on the 21st of June, and we have a lunar eclipse on the 14th of December. Well, back in 2001, it was 14th, 15th of December. It rather depends which part of the world you are in. So I think there is a real echo here. I will just add, because the United States is definitely in the mix here, because of course that's how 9/11, that's where 9/11 took place. And although the rest of the world was then involved after that, we are looking in a way to the United States at the moment in the coronavirus pandemic. And we can see again how these eclipses are going to play into the coronavirus story that we have. So let me get into the idea of what this eclipse means, or these eclipse cycles mean to all of us in different signs. Now, I have mentioned the idea that if you have the North Node in Gemini, and I've mentioned those years a little earlier, this next 18 months is going to be a really, really important 18 months for you. The reason being, if we go back to thinking about the eclipse or eclipses and the nodal axis of having something to do with karma and with destiny, there is a sense of destiny being fulfilled, of your sensing in these next 18 months by different events, and maybe those events will cluster around the eclipses, of doing what you were meant to do. This is part of your destiny, if you like. So the events that come into your life during this 18-month period are helping you fulfill your destiny, and you may get that feeling that you're really on track with it. It's a fulfilling period. Now, of course, if you were born with the North Node in Sagittarius, you are halfway through that cycle. So we're looking at the South Node's effect, if you like, in this next 18 months. And it doesn't mean that it'll be the absolute opposite of what happens if you have the North Node in Gemini. But what it does mean, it doesn't mean that these next 18 months are all about failure and disappointment, not in the least. But it does mean it's a time of assessment, reflection, and one where you may be questioning, what am I here for? What was I meant to be doing? So it becomes a point at which you get on track, and events will kind of make you think, am I on the right track? Is this what I'm meant to do? Maybe I've gone wrong somewhere. And so you write your own track, if you like. Now, if we go through all the signs of the zodiac, which I'm going to do now, we'll see really it's not just what does the North Node mean in Gemini to you. It's more to do with what do the eclipse patterns over these next 18 months, what is their effect likely to be? So if we start really, and I'm going to do this as a couple, so I'm looking at one sign and the opposite sign, because the eclipses, full moon and new moon, will be playing across this axis. So if I look at Aries and Libra, first of all, Libra being Aries' opposite sign, we see the 3rd and 9th houses of the horoscope being illuminated. And these are all about communication, travel. I think, you find your voice in the 3rd house, but you also find your place, I suppose, on the world stage to a certain extent. We bring out the whole world in the 9th house. So you've got this axis playing, so that the eclipses will tend to bring information into your life that will really affect a lot of things to do with how you use your voice, where you want to base yourself in terms of your environment. It has a lot to do sometimes with publication, social media. So all these things cluster around the time of the eclipse, and they either bring, as I said, that sense that you are on track with your destiny. These are the things that you're destined to be and do. Or they are the reverse, and they sort of suggest that maybe this is a time of reorienting yourself. Now, if we come to Taurus and Scorpio, the eclipses, the nodal axis now, will be on finances and self-worth. And these two are intimately connected. If we tend to feel full of value and our self-worth is high, then we don't experience such difficulties with finance, even if money isn't so plentiful. Somehow our self-esteem is in shape and we manage. Whereas if our self-esteem is really low and we have issues with how well we're being treated, which of course also means how well we're being paid, then these eclipses will tend to really emphasize the fact that we need to do something about our finances. And when those eclipses occur, they will have a financial aspect to them. Now, if we come to Gemini and we come to Sagittarius, this is where the nodal axis is now straddling. We are on the relationship axis. Now, I also say often about eclipses, not only that they're game changers and they tend to bring about what we might consider fateful events. When we look at the Gemini-Sagittarius, I often think that people bring us the message of an eclipse. We actually find out the meaning of an eclipse through what another person brings us. They either enter our life, they become our teachers, they shine a searchlight on our lives. And sometimes these people in themselves are important because we fall in love with them, or other relationships are formed with them that then change our relationship status quo. So these next 18 months are going to be very important in terms of relationships. Some Geminis and Sagittarians are going to be marrying, forming business partnerships, everything you think of with relationships, while others are going to be ending them. They're going to come to an end. But remember what I was saying about the season of eclipses, the cycle of eclipses, endings and beginnings. If something is ending, it's paving the way for a new beginning. Now, if we look at Cancer and Capricorn, this is a very tricky aspect because we're looking at the 12th and 6th houses. The 6th house has this label of work and health, and the 12th house is all about institutions. And you think, what am I going to do with that? What are eclipses? What on earth are they going to have? How are they going to have an effect on me? Well, I think that this axis has a lot to do with that big question: why am I here? What is my purpose? And if you are a Cancer or a Capricorn, that's a question that may pop up from time to time during these 18 months, but particularly around the time of the eclipses, when events will make you think that. It's definitely an axis of service. It's where we devote ourselves to duties and to others. So it may be that the events that happen clustering around the eclipses really focus on how we can serve other people. And also, I suppose, that second thing, were we born to serve? What are our responsibilities to other people? There is the axis of health in there as well. So whether that is something to do with our own personal health or our mental health or our dental health, well, that can be in there too. But I think the really bigger meaning of that 6-12 axis for Cancer and Capricorn is all about, what is my purpose? Why am I here? If we look on to Leo and Aquarius, we're now looking at the creative axis of the horoscope. We're looking at the 11th house of collaborations. We're looking at the 5th house of creativity. And that does bring in procreativity as well. So pregnancy, children. We're looking at entrepreneurial ventures. We're looking at things that are in our social milieu, as well as our creative selves in terms of what we create. That can be, an artistic thing. It can be, anything that you think of as using what you have to offer, bringing your creativity into things. Then these eclipses will tend to focus on that. So they will be the beginning and ending of enterprises. And they can also be your association with people, both in terms of, working as a team with people in a group, but also in terms of romantic relationships. And we find when we get full moons and new moons here, and certainly when they're eclipsed, then they are on steroids, if you like, then we get the beginnings of new romances and new collaborations, or we reach the end of those collaborations and creative enterprises. But of course, everything gives way to a new one in the event of endings. And these axes, or this particular axis, having a lot to do with pregnancy and childbirth, yes, there may be some unplanned pregnancies. And yes, maybe things related to your children will cause, quite a stir, whether they take the spotlight in some way, or your lives are much more uniquely connected with your children. 5th, 11th, all about creativity and collaboration. If we come now to Virgo and Pisces, this is our last pair, we're on the life direction axis. And really, in a way, you could say, just as a general rule of thumb, the eclipses that are forthcoming in this next 18 months really have the most major effect for the 4 mutable signs. That's Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces. But of course, wherever they fall in your chart, especially if they connect with planets and points, or things that are natally important, then you will also find eclipses, these fateful developments that change your course in some way. But if we look at Virgo and Pisces and we're thinking about life direction, the roots of life on the one hand, your family, your home, and on the other, your direction. This can be career, it can be your role in life. And of course, your role in life can be husband, wife, mother. Those are roles every bit as much as CEO of a company, or however else we might think of our roles. But this is where the eclipses are focusing their potential to change everything almost. So there will be periods when things come to an end, so that jobs will end. Maybe they'll end because of retirement. They don't always have to end because companies change and their policies change and you change along with it. Or whether indeed you change your location. This often happens with eclipses on this life direction axis. And you can move quite some distance. You're not just going to change your home, maybe move to the next street. You may be moving to the next state or the next country. So there can be big changes in terms of your location and also what you do as a career and your family. Your family may change, whether by birth or by marriage, so that the family grows larger. And this whole idea of, how an eclipse kind of brings events into your life that force you to change your course in some way. Sometimes, of course, and it's always very helpful when this happens, that on the day of an eclipse, so we might be looking towards the 5th of June or the 21st of June or the 5th of July, these eclipses that are just coming up, we might say, wow, bang on the button, that event happened either out there on the world stage or in your life. And you can see instantly, wow, that's exactly what was said. There's an event that has changed our course. I have to rethink where I'm going with this aspect of my life. But sometimes, and I talked about the season of eclipses, we have to give eclipses a little bit of a timeline. So we're already in the timeline of that eclipse. So from now, really, until the very end of July, maybe even in the early part of August, we can expect events aligned with what I've been talking about, sign by sign, that we will recognize as significantly changing our course. So I hope I've given you the kind of information that's going to prove useful. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to bring the understanding of astrology to you in as simple terms as I can muster, and all in the sense that we are prepared and that we look at events that happen to us as meaningful and not as slings and arrows of fate that we can do nothing about. They are all serve a purpose. Thank you for being with me, and I look forward to speaking to you, being with you on my next video. Bye for now.